so we're ready to go. Do you mind unmuting? Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Hi, folks. Thanks for joining us this evening. In the screen with me is Peter Gillen, my partner, and I want to welcome you on behalf of the folks who have put this together. Welcome to Duke and UNC late 1970s, which is why the lead-in music was what it was. And thanks for coming to hear about Tech for Campaigns. I first heard about this group just about a year ago when I was looking to be involved in more than check writing for national campaigns in the Senate, and found this to be an extraordinary group. Why? One word: red map. The Republicans in 2010 had a program that was quite specific to flip a number of legislatures Republican in order to pass conservative laws to test the Supreme Court, in order to control redistricting after the 2010 census, in order to stymie Democratic governors like Roy Cooper, and now, as many of you may have read in The Atlantic, and most frighteningly, an article by Barton Gellman today, to ignore the popular vote if it goes for Biden. The thesis that the Republicans in Pennsylvania are putting forth is that Trump can declare the results of the election fraudulent, mail-in, and have the state legislatures in Republican-controlled states throw out popular vote results, elect Republican electors, and therefore win. This is not a joke. It's actually a serious plan that these guys are looking at. So why am I involved in this? State legislatures are absolutely key. We have to take back as many as we can for the Democrats. Great. So now I'm involved in state legislatures. Why TFC? Well, two words: Jessica Alter. She has one negative going for her, and I'm going to state it right up front so you can drop off if you need to. She went to the University of Michigan. However, you can overcome that because this woman, who was an entrepreneur in residence at Social Capital, and before that, the founder CEO of several successful startups, which she flipped, looked at the 2016 results and said, this is crazy. Trump spent about 40% of his budget online. Clinton spent about 10% of her budget online, and most of that was repurposed from mass media. What are we doing? We're Democrats. We've got education. We're digital natives. We're literate. We should be online. So she emailed her friends and said, let's go. Let's change this. And in 3 short years, she's built a massive set of marketing tools. She's put together 14,500 volunteers in technology across the country. 2018, 200 campaigns, helped flip Virginia blue. This year, well over 200 campaigns. This woman rocks. Now, she should have gone to Duke or even North Carolina, but she didn't, so forgive her. And let me introduce our amazing Jessica Alter.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I was gonna out myself at the beginning of the call, so I'm glad Lisa did it for me. But just to show how important this North Carolina is to me, I am willing to put aside the rivalry I feel towards Duke and UNC, to be honest, for the greater good of society. So it is true, I went to Michigan, and I definitely have not been in politics my whole entire life. As Lisa mentioned, before starting Tech for Campaigns, I really worked primarily in technology, starting tech companies. And it was sort of an imaginary conversation I had with my paternal grandmother, who was a Holocaust survivor. When the first Muslim ban came out, I thought, what would she think seeing all this happen? And I imagined she would say to me, like, well, what are you doing about it? And the only thing I could have said at that time was, well, I'm yelling at people who disagree with me on social media. And that didn't feel like enough. So as Lisa said, a few friends and I started Tech for Campaigns, and here we are. Before I get into a couple of the reasons that we exist and what we've done, I want to thank Lisa and Peter and the entire host committee who made this evening possible. We're extremely grateful and really appreciate everything you guys have done. And also thank Senator Marcus and Doug Sosnick, who you'll hear from in just a bit, for joining us tonight. So if I'm not capturing your attention, you can make sure to look forward to what they say. But I will absolutely do my best. I want to just go through 3 sets of numbers tonight. So it's just a couple things quickly that you can think about. The first one is 3 to 5 cents. So Lisa mentioned states, but first I want to talk about tech and digital. In 2018, for every dollar a donor gave, only 3 to 5 cents went to digital. Even though it gets all the press and everyone loves to talk about it, it is getting a very small percentage of the dollars that campaigns are spending. Most of the money is going to TV and mail. Not only that, but when we build tech tools, and usually that happens at the presidential level, they're getting thrown out. So the Democrats are not just behind, but as this quote says, we're about a decade behind. So we're not even fighting the 2020 war or the 2018 war, we're fighting the 2012 war when it comes to tech and digital. And as someone who likes to create tech companies, this felt like craziness to me, because the whole point is to build something and let as many people use it as possible. And that's not what was happening. That is true up and down the ballot. This is actually research we did during the height of COVID, from the end of May till the beginning of July. Trump was outspending Biden 2 to 1 on Google digital spend. And as you can imagine, it doesn't get more sophisticated as you go down ballot. So the second big number I want to talk about is 1,000. Lisa mentioned red map. Basically, after the 2008 election, the Republicans went hard after state legislatures, and the Democrats lost 1,000 seats at the state level. That is basically a decimation. So you can see in 2009 that it was sort of blue and sort of red and kind of mixed. And then in 2017, it's honestly just a sea of red. And since we're here tonight to focus on North Carolina, I wanted to show you what happened in North Carolina Senate specifically. So from 1992 to 2008, the Democrats were in control of the North Carolina Senate. And then in 2010, as these maps started to change, the Republicans took control and the Democrats have not been able to get them back. Now, we're fighting against that and we're about 5 seats away, but it is really hard to gain back control once you lose it. The flip side, the good news is once you get it, hopefully you can keep it for longer. So we're fighting hard to keep it. You might be saying, well, that kind of sucks, but I don't live in North Carolina, so why does it matter? And there's several reasons. First and foremost, the state laws that get passed affect us federally. I'll give you a couple examples. One is voter suppression. Voting rights are state laws. Voting laws are state laws. So even though you don't live in North Carolina, they're affecting federal outcomes. Wisconsin, as one example, was lost in 2016 by about 23,000 votes. Hillary lost. And sometimes people say, oh, well, just you didn't campaign hard enough in Wisconsin. But actually, the state legislature passed a very strict voter ID law just before the 2016 election that they think prevented 300,000 people from voting. So even if a fraction of those people were able to vote, the outcome could have been different. The second, I know RBG's passing has hit a lot of people very hard. And, you know, a woman's right to choose is at risk. But what happens if Roe v. Wade gets overturned isn't that you live in a country where abortion is illegal. What happens is the states decide. So every state will get to decide if a woman has the right to choose. And what will happen is all those states that were colored red, and I'll go back just to show you, all these states that were colored red will likely not let a woman choose. And that's the divided country that we'll continue to live in. So it's not just about the Supreme Court, it's what will happen if we don't flip the legislatures. And a third big thing that affects federal outcomes is redistricting. The state legislatures control federal redistricting. So Senator Marcus and her colleagues have the power to change how congressional lines are drawn if they are in power. And she can talk a little bit more about how terrible redistricting, or gerrymandering, I should say, has been in North Carolina. So the first two numbers, 3 to 5 cents, 1,000, and the final set of numbers are about this guy, Tom Tillis. I'm sure you've heard of him. He's a US Senator, or one of them for North Carolina. Maybe what you didn't know about him is that he was a North Carolina state representative from 2007 to 2014, right before he was elected to the US Senate. In his last race, the average that his opponent raised was $170,000. In his 2020 race, we've now spent $50 million trying to defeat him, and we're not even sure if it's going to work. So the choices that we're making on the state level are, should we spend $170,000 to defeat the next Tom Tillis, or should we keep waiting till they get to a huge federal position like the Senate and spend $50 million and hope that we can get that outcome? And I think what the Republicans decided is, we're going to spend $170,000 all day long. And that is the ROI that they go for, and that we've been slow to adopt as the Democratic Party. And the choice is very stark. So then we're sitting here and saying, okay, this is depressing. What should we do about it? This is why we started Tech for Campaigns, to build a lasting tech and digital arm is the mission, and to focus on the states is our strategy. And the way that we do that is threefold. As Lisa said, we have a community now of over 14,000 tech and digital volunteers that work at companies like Apple, LinkedIn, HBO, Dropbox, and they get matched to campaigns specifically at the state legislative level to run all of their digital. That means building a website, that means running their digital ads, that means running their email programs, running their texting and data analysis. And I think Senator Marcus will talk a little bit about how that's been valuable for her. But we're able to do it at no cost to the campaigns. All we have to pay for is one full-time person in a state director that oversees all of the work in that state. So we are able to go into a state and help a dozen to 2 dozen campaigns for between $75,000 and $100,000 for the state, not per campaign, for the state. So it's an incredible way that we can scale at cost, in a cost-effective way. The other 2 prongs that we work on are technology and training. Technology means we're building products with our full-time team that get used across states and campaigns, the way that you would hope that technology products get built and used. Although right now, if Florida builds something, North Carolina doesn't even know about it, neither does Michigan. And not because they don't like each other, they just don't talk. And we do training for every state we go into on digital, because as a symptom of the overall problem, we don't provide standard tech or digital training for Democratic staffers or Democratic candidates. So what have we done so far? Not only have we helped 435 campaigns, 633 digital projects, and built 3 tech tools that are being used, but it's important to show what we've done at the chamber level to change that map, that very red map that we were showing you. Not only have we had chamber level flips that we are a part of at the state level in Maine, breaking supermajorities in Michigan and Pennsylvania, but in 2019, we were a huge part of the Virginia House and Senate flipping. And I know that sounds cool and it sounds good and it's a great little stat, but I think when you talk about that, you should talk about what came of that. And what came of that is really, honestly, awe-inspiring. Within 100 days of flipping the Virginia State House and State Senate in 2019, they passed criminal background checks. They implemented red flag laws. They ratified the Equal Rights Amendment, and they removed very restrictive voter ID laws and made same-day registration possible. That was in 100 days, the first 100 days. So it's impact that affects millions of people in the state and out of the state, because obviously they're now going to control federal redistricting for their state. So when we talk about flipping a chamber, I think it's important to talk about what the actual impact of that is. And now in 2020, we're in 21 states between both our talent and our tech. We have 222 campaigns, over 300 projects just in 2020. And North Carolina is a big part of that. We have 11 campaigns there and 36 projects. And we have a vote by mail program that is really cost effectively for between $2 and $7, registering new people to vote by mail and helping them vote that way. In North Carolina, in the Senate, as I said, we need to flip 5 seats and we need to defend 5, which is why we need to help more than 5 campaigns. Senator Marcus is one of those that we're helping to defend. To do that, we are able to bring in, as I said, 1 full-time person to run the entire state, and then give teams and have email and ads and texting projects that span almost a dozen campaigns. So it's a really cost-effective way to help the states and to make impact on those super important issues and redistricting that affect all of us. So without further ado, I want to hand it over to Senator Natasha Marcus. She is not only Senator for North Carolina District 41, she not only is a TFC candidate, but also a Duke Law alum, and has been part of this redistricting process. So Senator Marcus, I want to let you take it away.
Well, thank you, Jessica, and thank you to everybody for organizing this. This is the first I've got to meet you, Jessica, so I appreciate you being willing to put all this together and help my campaign, even though we'd never met. So thank you for putting your faith in me and getting the strength of Tech for Campaigns behind my work. I'm so very grateful for that. I am a Duke alum. I got my law degree there. I want to say, however, for everybody on this call, that my son-in-law is a recent Chapel Hill graduate, and Davidson College is in my district, and I live in Davidson, so I'm equally excited about all 3 universities, and of course I'm a big supporter of all of our UNC schools here in North Carolina, because I'm a Democrat and I believe in public education. So I just want to say all of that as a background for me. I think they told me that I'm the first North Carolina candidate to sign on to the Tech for Campaigns system, or whatever we call this fabulous thing that's helping me out. So I was proud to be the first one to take the big plunge, and have appreciated all your help. So I'm told you'd like to hear a little bit about my district and kind of how I came to be the senator for Senate District 41. And so I have to go back and do a little history, because up until 2018, this Senate seat, the one I now hold, which is the suburbs of Charlotte mostly, there's a section of that of the city of Charlotte as well, but it's mostly the suburbs surrounding the city. It had always been held by a Republican, like always. The same person for the previous 3 terms, and really no serious opposition. So, and the reason is because it was gerrymandered to be that way. Republicans, when they took control, as Jessica mentioned in 2011, and as Lisa mentioned, they did everything they could to keep that control. And the way they carved up Mecklenburg County allowed there to be at least 2 Republican senators, even though our county is overwhelmingly Democratic. But they were very careful. Mine was the most oddly shaped Senate district in the whole state. It encompassed the very northern part of the county, and then connected by a tiny little slice of 1 precinct down to the southernmost part of the county. And that was because there were Republicans up at the top and Republicans down at the bottom, and they wanted to give them all to the to the Republicans. So that's the way it was, and there wasn't much we could do about it. Those of us who were Democrats who lived here just knew that we really didn't have any choice of who our senator was going to be. It was going to be the Republican. There was nothing we could do about that. But after years of litigation, the court finally forced the legislature to redraw these lines and said, you have drawn these based on racial gerrymandering, and that is unconstitutional, and you have to fix them. And so in 2018, these lines were drawn. They were still gerrymandered based on partisanship, and I'll get to that in a minute, but at least they weren't allowed to pack all the Black voters into certain districts that were so heavily Democratic and basically left all the non people of color in these Republican districts. That's how they like it. And so they were forced to redraw the district. And so in 2018, for the first time ever, it became one that if somebody was willing to run and work really hard, it was in play for the first time. And so I gave it a lot of thought and decided, you know what, I know I have a good, strong base of support behind me, and I'm gonna do it. So I challenged the Republican incumbent, and with a lot of help and a lot of money raised and a lot of work, a lot of door knocks, we flipped the seat. And I was the only woman to do that, to flip a Senate seat in the whole state. I took my seat in the Senate along with 6 other new Democratic senators. So the 7 of us, we call ourselves the Freshman 7, or F7 for short. I'm the freshman leader, so I'm the leader of the freshman senators in the Democratic Party. And that's a full third of North Carolina Democratic senators. There's 21 of us, which is just enough to uphold the governor's veto. And so that just shows you the power of that changing of the gerrymandering, even to make it a little bit better, how many more Democrats we got just from that. And then what happened, if those of you who've been following North Carolina politics, we've now been ordered by the court to redraw them again. So while I was a senator and I served on the redistricting and elections committee, so I was part of this process, the court oversaw, because they don't trust this General Assembly anymore, they oversaw us very closely and told us to redraw maps again because the maps were still unconstitutional. They were extreme partisan gerrymandering in a way that was denying people their constitutional right to have their vote heard in a meaningful way. And so that has required yet another round of redistricting and has made the maps even better. So they're getting better for Democrats because there are more Democrats in North Carolina than the prior maps would have had you believe. And when the computer draws the maps, which is what they have done for these newly drawn districts now, guess what? Democrats win because it's more fair, and that's just the way it is. I'm sorry to say, Republicans, there are a lot more Democrats here than they want to admit. And so my district has changed again. And now for this 2020 election, about half of my district are people that were not in it before. I've lost half my district, unfortunately. So all that work I did to try to build a relationship with constituents, they're gone. So I have a new district. It's more Democratic than it was before. So I welcome that, and that's great. And so that's just, I hope that explains a little bit about how gerrymandering has directly impacted my race, but also the balance of power in the North Carolina Senate. And it's, by the way, the governor has no say in how districts are drawn in North Carolina. It's completely up to the General Assembly. So that's why it's so important. And I, along with many of my Democratic colleagues, have signed a pledge to say that when we're in power, we're going to get rid of partisan gerrymandering, period. It's Democrats used to do it. They never did it to the extent that Republicans have done it this decade. But I'm convinced that it doesn't make sense to have legislators drawing these maps. And we need to let voters feel like they're choosing their representatives instead of the other way around. And so I'm looking forward to the time, and I believe it's going to be this year when we get to take power, move Phil Berger to the back of the room where he's out of power. He's been terrible for our state for so many reasons for a decade now, and it's time for him to go. So the way we do that is we can't unelect him. His district is too safe, but we can make sure we elect more Democrats. And I've been working really hard to make sure we flip a few more seats. So just like my seat was flippable with help, there are other seats in North Carolina. We can definitely win 5. We might be able to win 6 or 7. Things are looking really good for us. And so that's what I'm focused on. So Tech for Campaigns has been helping me, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about that. So first, I will say that it is very clear, especially in the age of COVID now, that without a digital campaign, you're dead in the water. I can't tell you how many people call me because they're concerned about the yard signs. I don't see yard signs at the intersection of such and such and such and such. And I tell people, like, I appreciate your support. I'm glad you're worried about my campaign. But let me tell you what, yard signs don't vote, and they're not very persuasive, and they usually get mowed down anyway. What actually works, and I want to reassure you what I'm doing, is targeted digital ads. You're not seeing them, friend, because you're already on my team, and I don't need to pay to send a digital ad to you. I'm being smart about how I'm spending my money, and I am using this great team, my Tech for Campaigns team, to help me reach the voters I do need to persuade. And that's, a yard sign is irrelevant. A good digital ad followed up by a second good digital ad, that's how you get someone to come out and vote for you. And so I am so grateful that I have a team that's helping me do that well, and not relying on yard signs, which is so old school and bad for the environment and a hassle for so many reasons. So before Tech for Campaigns helped me, I was managing by doing my own email marketing for the most part. I have had campaign managers on and off, but I don't like to keep someone on staff year round because I think it's a waste of money, and I'm not that high maintenance that I need someone to tend to me every minute. So I try to keep my expenses down by doing my own email marketing, but I'm not great at it. And I've really appreciated the help now because we can slice and dice my list and be smart about who we email and what time we email, and have better emails that look nicer and much more professional. So that's been great. And then the digital team has been fabulous. They've helped me do videos. I've never had a video before where I speak to the camera about an important issue. The one I have up now is how can you make sure you're registered to vote, and why is it important, and where to go. And they put all the closed captioning underneath for me, and put my logo up there, so it looks really nice. And it just helps me reach out to those videos, particularly people who are maybe on the fence, who don't want to hear about Republican, Democrat. They don't want to hear me bashing Phil Berger. They want to just know that I'm a good senator who will bring them information. And so videos like that help me do that. And we're able to promote those. So they've been great, and they're really professional, and I appreciate the help so much. I had a digital team before that I was paying to do this, and I didn't get the kind of quality that I'm getting now, that I'm not paying for. And the money that I'm saving, just so you know, helps me put more money in the actual promoting the digital ads, but also allows me to help support those other campaigns I told you about, those 5 more seats that we need. So I'm able to send money to the Senate Democratic Caucus. I'm a member of our Senate Democratic Caucus Finance Committee. We need to raise a lot of money to help flip those seats. We need $1 million for each of those seats. So every penny I'm not needing for my campaign, I'm sending to the caucus, because we're working as a team, because we want to be in the majority come November. So one last thing I want to say, if you want to follow me on Facebook or Instagram, or both if you're on them, you'll get to see all these cool ads that we're promoting and that Tech for Campaigns have created. If you want to sign up on my website to get emails, you'll get to see all the cool emails that we're sending. They're all very engaging. You're going to love them all. So my website's natashamarcus.com, and you can find me on Facebook. That's easy enough to do. I'll stop there, Jessica. If people have questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Senator Marcus. You can post all of your questions in Q&A, and we'll also put a link up to Senator Marcus's site too. Before we start answering questions, I want to turn the mic over to Doug Sosnick, who I feel like needs very little introduction, but I'll give him one anyway. Doug is an acclaimed political strategist and a former White House political director, and deputy legislative director. He's co-authored the New York Times bestseller, Applebee's America: What Political, Business, and Religious Leaders Can Learn from Each Other. And he's a well-known expert and commentator. So we're very lucky to have him here, and he's gonna talk a little bit about his experience and what he's seen with North Carolina and the states. So Doug?
Great. Thank you very much, Jessica. So I grew up in North Carolina, and I have the distinction of not only going to Duke, but also I worked for the University of North Carolina on their football scandal. So I've been able to transcend the triangle. So I usually say I'm the oldest person in the room, so I want to give you a little historical context, but I think I'm tied for that now. But I just want to give you some sense of, from the mid-1970s, North Carolina became a real political backwater in American politics. In the year 2020, today, I think we're right at the 50-yard line and could be decisive not only in the presidential election, but also the Senate election. And I'm going to talk in a minute about how everything is tied. By the end of this decade, I think Democrats will this will be a blue state, much the same as what Virginia went through in the last 5 years. And I think probably by the mid-2040s, I'm not sure how many of us will be around for that, but by the mid-2040s, North Carolina will be the 5th largest state in the country. So this is a state at a tipping point, and it's going to become increasingly important nationally, due right now to the fact that it's a toss-up state, but in the future because of its size. In terms of the state legislatures and the importance of them, I think Lisa and Jessica covered a lot of that. I know one person though that in fact reminded me of why state legislative races are so important. I remember at a National Governors Association meeting, I think it was sometime in the summer of 2018, I was talking to Governor Cooper, and I asked him how it was going as governor. I had helped him a little bit in his campaign. And he said, well, I never dreamed that I was going to run for governor and spend 2 years of my life trying to elect enough Democrats in the legislature so that they couldn't override my vetoes. He said, but I can't get anything done without being able to do that. And obviously he was successful in that, but that just gave you some sense for him in the job of him realizing how immobile he was and how he was not able to do anything politically as long as the Republicans had control of the legislature with the veto power, overriding the veto. We've talked about what happened in the past. I just want to give you some context, though, to how significant the upcoming election cycle will be. This cycle in terms of impact because of reapportionment and redistricting. For the most part, until 2018, this has been last decade was a lost decade for Democrats. Because of the success of Republicans in 2010, Democrats were largely shut out for most of the decade in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Florida, and North Carolina. And to give you an idea politically, what happens when not only when the legislature turns that way, but in 2012, after the reapportionment and redistricting, the Democrats got 1.5 million more votes nationally for the House of Representatives, but the Republicans controlled the House of Representatives by 33 votes. And so that shows you what the impact is at the state and local level, not only there, but also at the federal level. And you pay an enormous price politically, we have for the last decade. Jessica talked about the policy problems that we've had because of the power of the Republicans at the state level. And remember, the federal government is basically broken. It's dysfunctional. And so as a result of that, that's accrued more and more power to the states. But for the Democratic Party, we've also suffered what I call the barbell effect. If you ever were wondering, as you looked at the stage for the Democratic debates, you had all these people that were 70 years or older and all these people who were 45 years or younger. And so the question was why? Well, the answer is when you get wiped out like we were in the last decade at the state and local level, we've lost our pool and rising stars of elected officials. And so that's why we have had virtually, I would say, no middle class by age in the last several cycles because all of our rising talent got wiped out in the ballot box. And so the Republicans have had a three-pronged approach to maintaining power at the state level. One is financial. As Jessica mentioned, they spend real money. But when you think about how little you spend at the local, state and local level and how much of a long-term impact you can have, it's a great return on investment. Secondly, they've had a legal strategy, not only in terms of the courts, but also denying people how to vote. And thirdly, is they've had a technological strategy, which they've invested. And I find it extremely ironic that if you go to any tech company, all the internet related companies, they're all Democrats in there, but somehow Republicans are better than the Democrats at harnessing technology in politics, which makes absolutely no sense. So to me then, the investment for now, this month, and into the future is enormous for a lot of reasons. One of which is you talk about the effect of voting at the top down, but also it's very significant now in terms of getting turnout and getting people to turn out at the local level, and it will help at the higher level offices. We have tribal voting now, and so the issue is how do you get people to come out to vote? And that's the ball game. And the state and local level, I think, what will help Cunningham in the Senate and also Biden at the top. Particularly, Biden is not that strong at the top, even though he's tied right now in the state. But we need to boost out people who are going to vote Democratic. And in many places, it's going to be easier to engage them at the state and local level than it is nationally. And the last thing is where I started, is that it really matters now what we do in North Carolina, not only in terms of North Carolina, but in terms of its national impact, not only in these races in 2020, but in the future. And we've got to play the long game. We've got to invest in the short term, not only to succeed in the short term, but to build a foundation to be successful over, I believe, a period of time going forward in which increasingly we're going to have as Democrats the wind to our back. So with that, I'd be happy to take, I guess we're taking questions.
Yes, thanks, Doug. Stephanie, do we have questions from the audience?
We have quite a few. Thank you. All right. So how do you select the specific races and candidates to support in the various states?
Sure. We have a data team that actually using data from previous elections, census data, et cetera, scores every state district in every state, and then rolls that up to show which state level chambers, houses, and senates we can make the biggest impact in. But to Doug's point, we don't only look at the cycle we're in, we're thinking about that and long-term. So we'll make investments in places like North Carolina where we can flip this year, but also in places like Florida and Texas that might be a 2-year cycle flip. And we reach out to the respective caucuses in that state and we work directly with them. We show them, hey, here's our model that says these are the 15 races that we should focus on. And they'll say, yes, that's pretty much correct. We'll tweak this one because there's a candidate doing really awesome work. And they give us that sort of qualitative feedback. And then Senator Marcus can attest, we actually get on the phone, our team gets on the phone with every candidate to find out what they need. So she's using ads and email teams. You can also do texting, you can also do websites, there's data teams. And so it's a menu of what they can choose.
Thank you. All right, next question. How many Dems are you working with and can you name the top 5 that have a real chance? I believe this is meant specifically in North Carolina.
We're working with 11 in North Carolina. Senator Marcus, do you want to talk about the top 5? We'll assume you mean the top 5 flips because
Yeah, well, that's always
all of the people that are defending have a great chance.
Yeah, so our defending, like 2 of my favorite members of the F7, my colleagues are Kirk Deviere and Harper Peterson, who won by very small margins in 2018. Their seats, one of them is the same, basically it's the same race. It's the guy who he defeated that's coming back at him and wants his seat back, and that district has not changed. That's Kirk Deviere in Cumberland County. So he's got a tough race that we need to defend. I'm hearing that it's looking good. He's working hard and polling is good, and he's been a great senator, so he deserves to stay. Harper Peterson's district got better when the courts forced us to redistrict. They had what they did down in Wilmington is they literally took out the African-American neighborhood in the middle of Wilmington and stuck it into the neighboring Republicans district in 2018. Harper Peterson won anyway, even with that chunk of the city taken out and put next door. Now that chunk is back in, so the city of Wilmington is whole again. And so his district got a little better with the new maps for 2020. So those are our two, I think, our most vulnerable incumbents, but I feel good about them both. They're both great. And then we have several others who are running. Two of them we're almost sure, knock on wood, that we're going to pick up because the districts changed so much that they now lean Democrat when they used to lean Republican. And that's, I don't know, do you want like specific names of candidates? Should I mention those, Jessica? Yes,
Sure.
no? I don't know how much detail. Okay, so Sarah Crawford in Wake County is very likely to win and pick up a seat that had been held by a Republican. The Republican incumbent, when he saw what the new map looked like that the computer drew, he literally got up from the computer during the committee hearing and announced there that he's not running again. He saw what, it was just the most obvious example of when you fix the maps and make them fair, that Republicans admit, yeah, I'm done. I mean, he just walked away. It was beautiful. So we're going to pick up that seat. I mean, don't not support Sarah. She still needs your help. She's trying to reach out to voters, but she's very likely to win. And then also in Mecklenburg County, the last Republican seat held in Mecklenburg County in the Senate is now more Democratic than most districts in Mecklenburg County, the way the computer drew it. It's a beautiful new, very Democratic leaning district. So the woman who's running there is a young African-American. She'll be the youngest member of the Senate when she's elected, DeAndrea Salvador, and she's gonna win. So she's great too. So that's two. We only need, as
those
we
are
said,
both
5.
TFC candidates, I will also say.
Oh, good. Okay, I didn't know that. Yeah, and so those are two we're definitely gonna get. We only need 5. We really only need 2 more plus the lieutenant governor, because she's the tiebreaker. We feel good about Yvonne Holly beating the lunatic that's running against her. So even if we just get 2 more plus the lieutenant governor, we're in great shape. But we think we can pick up Terry LeGrand's seat in Winston-Salem, Tess Judge, who's in the Outer Banks, Donna Lake, she's in Wayne and Lenore County, J.D. Wooten is in Alamance County, Helen Probst Mills is running, her district is probably the toughest of those in our top targeted races, but she's running for a second time and running really hard. So those are the other, oh, and Alan Wellens as well. So those are the top other races. And if we pick up just a couple of those, we're golden. And we think all of those people could win.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, did you have something to add, Jessica?
No, go ahead, Steph.
All right. Here's a question for Doug. It's an incredibly important election on the presidential front. What do you tell people about why they need to focus on states this year?
Well, because it's all linked. As I mentioned earlier, we have tribal politics now, and basically how you vote at the top of the ticket is how you vote at the bottom of the ticket. And in some states you have coattails, and in some states like Arizona, for instance, I think the Senate race there, Kelly, the Democrat, is actually going to turn out votes for Biden. So as we move to a world now where you're either on the red team or the blue team, when people come out, they don't split their ticket. And so the whole ball game right now is getting your people to vote. We have, as I think the senator has mentioned several times, there are more people out there right now that are Democrat than Republican. But that doesn't mean we win unless our people come out to vote. And so getting people coming out to vote, you're increasingly, you should feel quite assured that if they come out to vote for a Democrat anywhere on the ticket, they're going to vote for Democrats everywhere on the ticket. And that's the same with Republicans.
And can I add to that the reason we should care so much about state level politics is those are really the policies that impact your life most of the time. So much of what we do in the state legislature, everything from how we fund education to whether we expand Medicaid and how affordable is your health care, those are all state level issues. Whether women have a right to choose to have an abortion or not and how restricted that is, as Jessica mentioned at the top. But whether you live in North Carolina or not, you should care about North Carolina politics, because right now we should have more Democrats in Congress. And the reason we don't is because Phil Berger and his party have gerrymandered our state. They also draw the congressional lines. You know, this is the state where the chair of the House committee that drew those lines for Congress admitted that he was doing it for partisan advantage. His quote in the newspaper is, the only reason there are 9 Republicans and 3 Democrats in those congressional seats is that he says I couldn't figure out a way to make it 10-2. I mean, he just straight up admitted that he's doing it to benefit Republicans unfairly. And so that impacts the whole nation, because if we had more Democrats in Congress, guess what? They would support the things you care about no matter what state you live in. So it all is connected. And I will also mention that Tom Tillis, who's terrible and is one of the reasons why we're going to get a justice that is going to make our stomach turn to replace the fabulous Justice Ginsburg, is because Tom Tillis is going to allow that to happen. He got his start here in my district. He was my House rep. And when he retired, that was the first time I ran for office. He retired his House seat to run for US Senate. And it was an open seat. And I said, well, some Democrats got to try and take that seat because Tom Tillis was awful. That was me. I tried. I lost because the seat was so gerrymandered. But that's another reason why you got to care about state politics, because people like that impact the whole nation. Because of Tom Tillis, we're going to have somebody else, some Republican.
If I could just add one thing. So I've worked in national politics a long time, and states are different. So like in Massachusetts, people really care who their senator is. North Carolina is a state that's been famous. No one cares who their senator is. When Kay Hagan got elected in 2008, I think 30% of the people in the state didn't even know who she was. This is not a state that focuses on federal office. For some reason, they think that people come to Washington and don't do anything, but they really do care more in North Carolina than most states about state and local, much more so than the Senate. The other thing I'll mention is if the country's, I would say, not in love with either political party, but as long as Donald Trump defines what it means to be a Republican, the Democrats have an enormous opportunity to become the majority party. And Mitch McConnell understands that they are on the wrong side of history. They are, to the vernacular of what I've done with many of you on the call, this is like last call for the Republicans. They see where it's going, and that's why it is so important for them at all costs to lock in the Supreme Court, because that's the only institution of government that they're going to be able to control based on the tides of history and where the country is headed.
And I'll just add and also to reiterate, you can stop the next Tom Tillis now, which costs $170K, or you can wait 10 years and pay $50 million again. Those are your options. And when you think about where your dollars are going, the ROI is just very, very clear.
All right, we've got a lot of questions. Let's see how many. This is good conversation. Okay, what are Dems doing that needs to be addressed?
Well, we only have 9 more minutes, so I'll just say on my end, I think the Democrats don't have a strong tech or digital strategy overall. The Republicans do. I don't even remember who said it or how many of us said it, but it seems shocking for people because they say, oh, but all these tech people are funding Democrats, but that's translating into dollars. That's not translating into strategy. And so we really need to be able to invest in not just a one-time thing, not just helping candidates, which is important one time, but a sustainable long-term competitive advantage. People spend 8 hours a day online. This isn't cool anymore to have a strategy. As Senator Marcus said, you're dead in the water if you don't have one. In 2008, when Obama did it, it was cool. Now it's table stakes. So we have to be able to have that. Doug or Senator Marcus?
Well, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but I will anyway. The Democratic Party is a divided party. And the only thing holding the party together right now is the hatred of Donald Trump and the desire at all costs to remove him. That's why Biden got the nomination. But we are a divided party. Win or lose the day after the election, we will litigate out where the party's going to head in the future. But the divisions that we have as a party philosophically and ideologically transcends all the way down to how we're organized on things like technology and other kinds of issues. And so the Republicans play the long game and we don't. And that's what we're going to have to do as a party. Right now, what we've got to do is beat Donald Trump. And the big way to do that is to produce a big Democratic turnout. And if people turn out to vote against Donald Trump, they're going to turn out to vote in North Carolina for Cunningham. And they're going to turn out to vote for the senator and her colleagues and also state reps. But we as a party we're going to have to resolve our differences, which we have not done in 3.5 years. And they're enormous because we can't build a long-term strategy as a party if we're divided like this.
All right.
Republicans fall in line and Democrats all have diverse opinions that we value. That is the crux of a lot of the problems because Republicans.
We're snowflakes.
Well, Republicans just do as they're told. I see it in the Senate. They all always vote together, all of them, all the time, no compromise. So, and we don't as Democrats, because we see the gray areas, and I don't think that's a bad thing, but it makes it harder to win.
Yes. All right. This is the last question I'm going to ask, and it's been asked in a couple of different versions. So here we go. In 2016, voter suppression was a big issue for North Carolina, and it's a huge ongoing problem. How are you thinking about this problem for this election, especially through the lens of COVID? I'm sure everyone has an opinion on that one. So
I'll start, and then obviously you guys should chime in. I would say voter suppression is a huge issue starting in way before 2016. But I think we're starting to better understand it, thanks in part to data. For us as an organization at Tech for Campaigns, we look at it in two ways. The campaign side, where we're working with all our candidates. I mean, voting in North Carolina started 2 weeks ago. So we're already in GOTV, Get Out the Vote. And we're doing that with our candidates, both through ads, email, texting. And we're making sure that they're voting, all the way down the ballot. And making sure that if they are registered to vote by mail, that they know how to do that. We have a separate initiative that is not coordinated with campaigns that is helping to both register people to vote by mail and make sure that they do vote. We just actually expanded that to help with voter education for vote by mail in North Carolina. Because there's been a high rejection rate. So that's a little bit about how we're thinking about it. Vote by mail is, going to change this election in sort of every sense of the term, and could really determine the outcome. So we're fairly focused on that.
For my part, I'll just say, one of the main bits of legislation that I was working on is a comprehensive election protection bill to specifically address the challenges of COVID. I didn't want people to feel like they had to risk their lives in order to vote. I didn't want people to not vote because they didn't feel safe. So I worked with Democracy NC and the Brennan Center for Justice and so many other groups in putting together an extensive bill that addressed all the areas that I thought we should improve for at least during the COVID election here. Some of what we got through, like we got to reduce the number of witnesses required on the absentee ballot. North Carolina required 2. We were one of only few states in the whole nation that required 2 witnesses, and that would have been a huge hurdle for way too many people. So we feel good we won on that. We got it reduced to 1. But some other things that we thought would be important, such as prepaid postage on absentee ballots, we lost. Republicans just wouldn't let us do it, and we don't have enough votes to force it. So people now have to go to the post office and ask, how many stamps on this weird shaped envelope, in order to mail it back. So we won some things, we lost others. We made sure we got Sunday voting back during early voting. That was a huge method of voter suppression. I mean, they had all the Black churches did their souls to the polls. They get people on a bus and bring them over and vote. On the last Sunday of early voting in North Carolina, it became quite a tradition. Republicans saw that. Guess what they did? They eliminated Sunday early voting. I mean, it was just the most obvious attempt at voter suppression that we've seen. So we got Sunday early voting back. That was good. But, you know, the truth is we can't do as much as we need to do and should have done. There's going to be a lot of people in nursing homes, for example, who aren't going to be able to vote by absentee because the staff at a nursing home is forbidden by North Carolina statute from helping them. For good reason. There was some worry about too much pressure being put to force people to vote in one way or the other. But during COVID, you can't have family and friends come in from outside to help you do that either. So who's going to help people? And the Republicans refused to allow that, which was really silly because there's probably more Republicans wanting to vote from a nursing home than Democrats. But we thought it was important to allow them to vote too.
All right. Oh, Jessica, you're muted.
Before we let everyone just donate, I wanted to tell you what your dollars can enable, because I know everyone's on the Act Blue page right now. So importantly, as I mentioned, not only are giving to states high ROI, but giving to Tech for Campaigns is incredibly high ROI. Even my lawyers, some of whom are on this call, let me say that we are the highest ROI in politics. But just as an example, $500 funds a digital campaign project like Senator Marcus's email program. $2,500 helps like an entire set of state, House or Senate races use our analytics tool. So the ROI is not only high, but you know it's going to help with this incredibly important piece of campaigning that is always important, but that is the only way to campaign now that COVID has hit us. So I hope you'll join the host committee that I'm so thankful for in supporting Tech for Campaigns and helping to flip North Carolina. Without further ado, I will let the host committee take back over.
So thanks for taking your valuable time to learn about Tech for Campaigns. I know we're all getting asked to give money to politics right now. When I give to campaigns or causes, I often wonder, where does that money go? The reason I'm so excited about TFC is that with this organization, I know it's going to help candidates with tech and digital. Plus, as Jessica explained, what they're able to do with $1,000 has a very high ROI. Efficient and effective, kind of the holy grail for political contributions. If we don't invest in states and we don't invest in building a true sustainable competitive advantage around technology and digital, we'll be living in a country that suppresses voting rights, denies women the right to choose, and is generally subject to minority rule. On behalf of all of this evening's hosts, thanks for being here. In these crazy times, I needed something to turn my attention to that feels like it is making a major impact, and that is Tech for Campaigns. If you're looking for that and care about ROI and these key issues, I hope you'll join me and the host committee in giving to TFC and helping to turn North Carolina and other states blue. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Have a great night.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you.